My dad adopted someone else and had no idea I'd just cost him everything. My name is Jordan Cahill. I am 33 years old, and 3 hours ago I walked out of a lawyer's office with ink still drying on papers that are going to tear the financial ground right out from under my family. My dad doesn't know yet. Right now, he's standing in front of the mirror in the house on Oak Ridge Drive, rehearsing a speech he wrote on a yellow notepad. I've seen him do this before every major moment of his life: big announcements, company toasts, milestone dinners. He practices until the words feel like they're coming straight from the heart. He's good at that, making rehearsed things sound real. Tonight, 27 family members are gathered around a long dining table with the good china out, crystal glasses polished, and tall taper candles that Sandra picked up from some overpriced home boutique downtown. My dad has a big announcement to make. There's a framed document propped on an easel behind his chair. There's a photographer in the corner. Happy tears are coming, I promise you that. I already know exactly what my dad is about to say. I know because I found it on his desk 4 days ago. And what he wrote, specifically what he wrote about the daughter he always deserved, is the reason I drove straight to my attorney's office this afternoon and put my signature on 3 documents that are going to change this family forever. But here's what none of them have any idea about yet. The speech isn't even the worst part. What comes after the speech, what shows up in a white envelope 9 days from now, is something my father cannot take back, cannot charm his way out of, and cannot fix with a phone call. He will have exactly 90 days to figure out how to survive it. And right now, he's straightening his collar in the mirror, thinking tonight is the best night of his life. Welcome to Silent Revenge, the channel where the people who were pushed to the edge finally get to tell their side. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe right now and drop a comment below. You are going to want to be here when this story lands. Now let's get into it. When I was 9 years old, my dad loaded me into his big white work truck and drove us out to a job site on Highway 12 before sunrise. The dew was still thick on everything. He lifted me up onto a stack of raw lumber, pointed up at a heavy steel beam stretching across the ceiling of a half-built house, and said, "Look at that, Jay. You know what that beam is doing? It's carrying the whole load. Everything else stands up because that thing doesn't budge. That's the job I want for you someday." I held on to every word. My father is Dale Cahill. He owns Cahill Land and Development LLC, a property development company out of Hartwell County, Tennessee. He started as a laborer on someone else's crew at 22. He took the company over from his own father, my grandfather Eugene, at 33 and grew it into the most established land development operation in the county. Residential subdivisions, commercial lots, mixed-use projects. Over 20 active sites running at any given time. My mother passed when I was 6. Breast cancer. She was only 33. After she was gone, it was just me, my dad, and Grandpa Eugene. Eugene Cahill didn't talk a whole lot, but when he did, it counted. He smelled like sawdust and black coffee. He kept a jar of peppermints on his oak desk and never once raised his voice in my entire childhood. Not once. He ran the business from behind the scenes, the contracts, the books, the legal structure, all of it. My dad swung the hammer. Eugene held the whole operation together. Every Sunday after church, Eugene would bring me back to his study, a wood-paneled room at the back of the old Cahill family home on Oak Ridge Drive. That house had been in our family for decades, and Eugene's study was the heart of it. He had an oak desk he'd built with his own hands, a green banker's lamp, and a glass paperweight shaped like a pine tree. He'd let me use the company stamp on invoices and talk to me like my opinions meant something. "Don't you ever let anyone make you feel like a visitor in your own family," he told me once. I was 10. I filed it away without fully understanding it yet. That was all before Sandra walked into our lives. My dad met Sandra Pruitt when I was 19, about 6 weeks before I left for college. She worked the front desk at a real estate office on Main Street in downtown Hartwell. She had a daughter from her first marriage, Kayla, 9 years old. Sandra was attentive, funny, always bringing food over, always asking my dad thoughtful questions about his day. She made him feel seen. I understood that. 11 years of widowhood is a long time to feel unseen. But here's the thing nobody told me about Sandra. Her warmth had limits. Clear, consistent, invisible to outsiders limits. She was wide open with my dad, sweet with Kayla, charming to anyone she needed something from. But me? When my dad left the room, it was like the temperature dropped 3 degrees. Nothing you could point at. Nothing dramatic. Just less. Jordan, honey, Kayla really needs her own space to grow. Do you think you could move your things down to the guest room? Just until we settle in. This was 4 months after the wedding. My bedroom, the one I'd slept in my whole life, became Kayla's art studio. My posters came down. Her drawings went up. Then the family photos changed. The portrait of my parents on their wedding day came off the mantel. New photo went up, Dad, Sandra, Kayla, and me at the state fair, but I was half a step behind everyone on the far right. By the following Christmas, I drifted to the edge of the frame. And the Christmas after that? Whole new portrait. Professional studio shoot. Dad, Sandra, and Kayla in matching burgundy sweaters. They had it taken while I was at school. Nobody said a word to me. I found out when I came home for winter break and saw it hanging in the exact spot where my parents' wedding photo used to be. I stood there for a full minute just staring at it. I had wanted to be a structural engineer since that morning on Highway 12 when my dad pointed at that steel beam. When I asked him for help with tuition, he sat at the kitchen table and rubbed the back of his neck. Engineering's a tough road, Jay. Sandra thinks maybe business management makes more sense. Study practical, you could even come work here one day. Sandra thinks. We both think. I found every scholarship I could. I worked nights at a print shop and weekends at a grocery store. I graduated from East Tennessee State with a structural engineering degree, $38,000 in student loans, and zero help from my father. He came to graduation. He sat in the 7th row with Sandra and Kayla. Kayla was on her phone the entire ceremony. I kept scanning the crowd for my dad's face and landing on hers instead. Afterward, he hugged me and said, "Knew you'd pull it off, kiddo." He smelled like the same aftershave he'd worn my whole life. For 1 second, I was 9 years old on that lumber pile, and then the second passed. They left before the reception. Sandra had dinner reservations. The phone calls got shorter every month after that. 6 minutes became 3. 3 became 1. Every holiday, some new reason why things had to be different this year. Jordan, didn't we mention? We're doing Christmas morning early. Kayla's got a showcase. Thanksgiving's going to be low-key this year. Just us. Just us. A 2-word sentence that had quietly, deliberately rearranged itself to leave me out. Grandpa Eugene died on a Thursday morning in February. He was 81. Heart attack at the oak desk in his study. They found him with his reading glasses on and half a cup of coffee still sitting by the banker's lamp. The funeral was at Grace Community Church on Cedar Avenue. Over 200 people showed up. Eugene Cahill was the kind of man who remembered your kids' names and asked how your mother was doing. The whole county came to say goodbye. Sandra complained about the seating. I just feel like immediate family should be up front, Dale. Not second cousins and old business contacts. Immediate family. She meant herself and Kayla. She did not mean me. My Aunt Beverly, my dad's older sister, didn't say a single word. She just took my arm and walked me straight to the front pew. After the service, Eugene's attorney pulled me aside. His name was Robert Stein, a careful man in a charcoal suit who had handled Eugene's legal affairs for 25 years. Your grandfather left something for you, Jordan. He explained. Eugene had placed 42% of Cahill Land and Development LLC into a trust in my name. The shares would vest when I turned 30. Until then, they were locked and secured. My dad knew some kind of trust existed. Eugene had mentioned it once years back, but not what was in it. Inside the envelope Eugene left was one handwritten note on his personal stationery. Your daddy's a good man, but he's got blind spots the size of barn doors. This 42% is your foundation in this family. Guard it. Don't you sign it away for anyone, no matter what they promise you. Pop. I was 25. I had 5 years before any of it became real. I tucked that note into my coat pocket and stood alone in Eugene's study for a long moment before leaving. The oak desk was still there. The green banker's lamp was still on. I could still smell the coffee. If you're already hooked on this story, go ahead and hit that like button right now. It helps Silent Revenge reach people who need to hear stories like this one. And don't go anywhere. What happens next is the part that changes everything. On my 30th birthday, I drove to Robert Stein's office and signed the paperwork making the trust official. 42% of Cahill Land and Development LLC was now mine on record, registered with the state, listed in the LLC operating agreement, reflected in every tax filing. Not a note in a drawer. Real. Robert walked me through the agreement page by page. 61 pages, drafted by Eugene and a contract attorney named Patricia Howe back in 2001. My father had signed the agreement years ago without reading past page 8. There's one clause your grandfather specifically wanted you to understand, Robert said, setting his finger on a highlighted paragraph. Clause 8.4. I read it through twice. Voluntary relinquishment by any member triggers mandatory buyback at independently appraised fair market value. Remaining members must complete the buyback within 90 calendar days, or forfeit operational control to a court-appointed trustee. Robert leaned back. Eugene built that clause to protect you. If you ever walked away from the company, they'd be legally required to pay you the full appraised value of your shares. They can't absorb them. They can't reclassify them. They have to pay, or a court takes over the LLC. I sat with that for a long time. The office air conditioning hummed. Traffic moved on Harrison Boulevard below. I hope I never need this, I said. Robert nodded. Eugene hoped the same thing. 3 years passed. I designed commercial buildings and load-bearing structures for a firm in Knoxville. I paid off every dollar of my student loans. I bought a small condo 40 minutes outside Hartwell. I didn't think about Clause 8.4. Not once. I tried to build something real with my dad instead. I want that on the record. The month I turned 30, I sent him an email. Dad, I'd like to sit down and talk about what my role in the company might look like going forward. What works for you? He replied 6 days later, Sure thing, Jay, let's find a time soon. Soon never came. I called Sandra and suggested a family dinner. Your dad's been under a lot of pressure lately, she said. Maybe try again next month? Next month became the month after, which became silence. I invited my dad to lunch 3 times. Cancelled the first. He simply forgot the second. The third time, he showed up 18 minutes late, barely touched his food, and walked out the door when Sandra texted that Kayla needed a ride to an appointment. We talked for 11 minutes. That was our longest conversation in 2 years. I sent a formal letter, not legal, just honest. I laid out my ownership position. I asked for quarterly check-ins and a seat at financial review meetings. I sent it by both email and certified mail. Myself think about that manila folder on Robert Stein's desk. Stay with me. 'Cause what you just heard is only the beginning. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Jordan should sign those papers? Let's hear it. I'll be reading every single one. The following Tuesday, the text came. From my dad directly, which was unusual. He almost always communicated through Sandra. Father's Day dinner. Sunday the 18th, 6 p.m. The whole family, Jay. Be there. Dad. I read it 3 times. He hadn't personally invited me to anything in almost 2 years. I called Aunt Beverly. He's planning something, she said before I could even finish asking. Sandra has been organizing all week. Good tablecloth, crystal out, she even brought in a photographer. A photographer? For a family dinner. Jordan, honey, that is not a dinner. I don't know exactly what it is, but it is something. I hung up and looked at the fireproof box sitting in my closet. That slow, heavy feeling settled in, the kind that comes right before a structural failure test when you can read the stress in the material but the crack hasn't happened yet. Called Robert Stein. Robert, if I chose to exercise Clause 8.4, the voluntary relinquishment, how fast could you have everything ready? A pause. I can have it drafted, reviewed, and ready to sign by Friday noon. This Friday. This Friday. I checked the calendar. Today was Tuesday. The dinner was Sunday. Go ahead and draft it, I said. I'm not saying I'll sign. I just need it ready. Understood. You'll have it Friday at noon. I hung up, made dinner alone the way I'd made dinner most nights for the past 14 years, sat at my kitchen table and stared at nothing. Friday works, I thought. Friday works if I need it. Friday came. Robert's paperwork was sitting in a manila folder on his desk. I didn't sign it. Not yet. That afternoon, I drove to the house on Oak Ridge Drive to help with setup. Aunt Beverly had asked me to come by, and Sandra had made clear that the whole family should chip in. What she meant was, I would carry folding chairs out of the garage. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and Sandra's perfume. Kayla was in the living room talking on her phone, laughing loudly. She didn't look up when I walked past. In the dining room, the table was already set for 27. Name cards at every seat. I found mine at the far end, between a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years and an empty chair. My dad's seat was at the head. Kayla's card sat to his right. Sandra's to his left. I carried the chairs. I hung the banner. I kept my mouth shut. Then I walked past the kitchen island and stopped cold. On the counter sat a new picture frame. Gold-edged, ornate, the kind you buy when you want people to notice it immediately. It was empty, but a small white card tucked inside the mat read, Certificate of Adoption, State of Tennessee. Behind it, a courthouse envelope. Return address, in the matter of adult adoption, petition filed. From the living room, I heard Kayla's voice clearly. I know, it's happening. It's going to be like actually official. I set the last chair against the wall. I picked up my keys. I drove 40 minutes home without a single song on the radio. Saturday morning. Aunt Beverly's cream-colored ranch house on Magnolia Court. We sat at her kitchen table, strong coffee, a plate of biscuits she pushed toward me without asking. Jordan, I need to show you something. She came back from the hallway holding a photograph. Professional family portrait. Dale, Sandra, and Kayla, coordinated outfits, studio lighting, warm practice smiles. The same photo now hanging above the fireplace on Oak Ridge Drive. I wasn't in it. When was this taken? February. Sandra posted it with the caption, Our Little Family. I looked at it for a long time. 3 people. A sealed unit. No gap. No acknowledgement that a 4th person had ever existed in that frame. I asked your dad about it, Beverly said quietly. He told me you preferred not to be in photos. I never said that. I know you didn't, honey. Kitchen clock ticked. A lawnmower hummed down the street somewhere. Beverly reached across and put her hand over mine. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. That wasn't entirely honest. Robert's paperwork was sitting in a folder on his desk. Pen was right there waiting. But I still wanted to be wrong about all of this. I still wanted to walk into that Father's Day dinner and have my dad look at me, actually look at me the way he used to, and say something that proved I still existed in his story. 1 sentence. That was all I needed. I'm going to go to the dinner, I said. And I'm going to see what he does. Beverly squeezed my hand and held on. Now here's the part of this story nobody in my family saw coming. Twist that made everything else fall into place. About 10 days before the dinner, I ran into an old family friend named Walt Greer at a coffee shop on Harrison Boulevard. Walt had worked alongside Grandpa Eugene for close to 20 years, handled site acquisitions and vendor relationships back when the company was still growing. He was the kind of man Eugene trusted completely, blunt, loyal, no filter. Walt set his coffee down and looked at me over his reading glasses. "You know what your daddy's been cooking up over at the company?" I told him I hadn't been included in anything in years. Walt leaned forward, hands around his mug. "He's been in talks with a developer out of Nashville. Full company buyout. Big money on the table. And Jordan, I sat in that first meeting and your name wasn't on a single piece of paper. Not as a party. Not as a shareholder. Not even a footnote." I set my cup down slowly. "How do you know all this?" "Because they brought me in to consult on site valuations, and the second I saw you weren't included, I walked right back out." Eugene would have absolutely lost his mind. Walt shook his head. "They're banking on you not knowing what you own, Jordan." I thanked him. I drove home slowly, windows down, thinking, a Nashville buyout. My dad couldn't legally sell that company without my consent as a 42% owner, unless he found a way to reclassify my shares first. And 3 days later, I would see the exact plan for that on Sandra's phone screen. 2 days before the Father's Day dinner, I was back at the house helping arrange centerpieces. Dad was at the office. Sandra was in the backyard directing 2 of Kayla's friends hanging string lights. Kayla was upstairs. I was alone in the kitchen folding napkins the way Sandra had shown me earlier. Sandra's phone was on the counter, plugged in, face up. It buzzed. The screen lit up and the message preview was right there in front of me. Group chat. Name, Cahill family. 3 participants, Dale, Sandra, Kayla. I was not in the group. Sandra's message from 40 minutes earlier. After Sunday, we reclassify her shares as dormant. Talked to the accountant already. Then we move forward with Nashville before Q4. My father's reply, she won't even notice. She never comes into the office anyway. And below that, Kayla, can we also change the office door code? LL. I stood completely still. Kitchen faucet dripped. One of Kayla's friends laughed at something outside. I picked up Sandra's phone. I took 4 screenshots and forwarded them to myself. I deleted the sent confirmation from her outgoing thread. I set the phone back exactly as it was, screen down, cable in. Then I walked down the hall to Eugene's old study. That room had been the heart of this house long before my dad moved in. Eugene had built the desk himself decades ago, had kept it through everything. My dad used the space now but hadn't changed a single detail. Same oak desk, same green banker's lamp, same pine tree paperweight on the corner. I pressed my palm flat against the warm wood and stood there. 5 years of waiting for that trust. 3 years of trying every way I knew to be part of this company. And the whole time they were building a plan to make me disappear from the books before I could use what Eugene left me. The Nashville deal. The dormant reclassification. Kayla's name on the company roster where mine should have been. I lifted my hand off the desk. I got in my car. I drove straight to Robert Stein's office. I signed every page. If you've ever been the one doing all the math while everyone else was doing the celebrating, if you've ever been the person holding the door open for people who never once said thank you, comment below right now. Tell me I'm not alone in this. And if you haven't subscribed to Silent Revenge yet, do it right now. We are just getting to the good part. The notary was a woman named Cynthia, silver hair, reading glasses on a beaded chain, zero small talk. I sat in Robert's office at 2:22 on a Friday afternoon and put my name on 3 documents. The voluntary relinquishment of my 42% stake in Cahill Land and Development LLC. The request for independent fair market appraisal. The formal legal notification to all remaining members. Robert placed each signed page into a blue folder without rushing me, without once asking if I was sure. Once I file on Monday, the 90-day clock starts, he said. Based on the company's current revenue and asset values, your 42% stake comes out to approximately $465,000. And if they can't pay within 90 days, operational control is surrendered to a court-appointed trustee. The LLC restructures under court supervision. I nodded. $465,000. That was the price tag on 14 years of silence, once someone finally got around to reading the operating agreement. You still have a 48-hour window, Robert said. Call me any time before Sunday at 2:22 p.m. and I shred everything. No filing. No record. No consequence whatsoever. I drove home. I took out the fireproof box from my closet and opened Eugene's original copy of the operating agreement, 61 pages, yellowed at the edges, his handwriting pressed into every margin. I turned to page 38. Clause 8.4. Underlined in red pen. Eugene's note in the margin beside it. DC signed without reading. DC equals Dale Cahill. This clause is Jordan's armor. Keep it here. I closed the folder. Tomorrow was Sunday. Sunday morning. 6:45 a.m. The light came through my curtains thin and gray, the kind that makes everything feel quieter than it actually is. I lay there and thought about calling Robert. Thought about canceling the whole thing, putting on a dress, showing up with a bottle of wine and a smile like none of this had happened. That window was still open. I could still pull back. I got up. Showered. Stood in front of my closet for longer than I should admit. I chose a navy dress, simple and clean with a belt. Eugene's favorite color had always been navy. He wore a navy tie to church every Sunday without exception. I put on the small gold stud earrings my mother used to wear. Aunt Beverly had kept them in a velvet box for me after she passed. Never said a word about it, just handed them to me one day. I called Beverly. I'll be there. Jordan, you don't have to go. I know. I looked at my phone. Robert's number was right there in my recent calls. One call before 2:22 and everything disappears. I put the phone in my purse. I was not going to cause a scene. I was not going to cry at that table. I was not going to stand up and announce everything I'd figured out. I was going to sit down, eat the food, and watch my father make his choice in front of every person in that room who shared his last name. Then I was going home. And whatever came after that was just math. I pulled into the driveway at 5:50. Cars lined both sides of Oak Ridge Drive. Uncle Victor's Tahoe, Cousin Tyler's truck, Beverly's silver Camry, a black SUV from Sandra's side that I didn't recognize. The house was lit up and warm from the street. Through the front window I could see people moving around, dishes being passed, Kayla laughing at something across the room. The banner over the fireplace read Happy Father's Day in gold glitter letters. Balloons tied to the porch railing. I sat in my car for 2 minutes. Checked my face in the mirror. Smoothed the front of my dress. Touched my mother's earrings. Then I got out. Inside it was loud and warm, 27 people in a space meant for maybe 14. Cousins I'd seen twice in the past year. Aunts who grabbed my face and told me I looked thin. Sandra's mother who called me Dale's other one every single time we met like it was my given name. Sandra met me at the kitchen doorway. Oh, Jordan, you made it. How sweet. Air kiss near my cheek. Her perfume was immaculate. Her smile was precisely the right temperature. I found my seat. Far end of the table. Cousin Derek on one side, an empty chair on the other. Nobody had saved me a spot near the head. Aunt Beverly appeared and sat right beside me without a word, squeezing my hand under the tablecloth. 7:10, my dad tapped his wine glass with a fork. The room settled. Sandra walked to the light switch and dimmed the overheads. The taper candles caught, throwing long shadows up the walls. Everything about it was choreographed, the lighting, the pause, the practiced beats. Everyone, Sandra said in that warm, perfectly produced voice of hers, Dale has something very special he'd like to share with all of us tonight. She turned toward Kayla. Ready, sweetheart? Kayla nodded. Her eyes were already bright. I looked past my father's shoulder and saw it. Behind his chair, propped on a small wooden easel, was the gold-framed certificate, the same one I'd spotted on his desk 4 days earlier. Certificate of Adoption, State of Tennessee. Calligraphy caught the candlelight like it was designed to. Next to the easel stood Sandra's friend from the photography studio, camera with a long lens already raised and waiting. Planned reveal. A full production, not a dinner at all. Sandra caught me looking. Our eyes met across the table. She smiled. Not the polite version, not the nervous one. The other one. The smile of a woman who has already won and needs you to know it. Beverly leaned toward me. What is going on, Jordan? I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, set it back down. Watch, I said quietly. My dad stood at the head of the table. He cleared his throat. He held his wine glass and squared his shoulders the way he always does before a big moment. Family, he said, lifting the glass. Family is the only thing in this world that truly matters. He paused. Sandra nodded. Kayla clasped her hands. He talked about losing my mother. He talked about years of emptiness and wondering if he'd ever feel like himself again. He talked about Sandra walking into his life and filling the space back up. And then he talked about Kayla, her laugh, her energy, the way she made mornings feel worth getting up for. He said Kayla's name 9 times in 4 minutes. I counted every one. He said mine 0 times. Not once. Not in passing. Not both of my girls or my kids or even a glance toward the end of the table. He spoke as if the 9-year-old girl he'd lifted onto that lumber pile had simply been edited out of the story somewhere along the way. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My face completely still. Some cousins were already crying. Beverly was stiff as a board beside me. My dad set his glass down, reached behind his chair, and lifted the gold-framed certificate from the easel with both hands. Kayla Elizabeth Pruitt, he said, voice cracking right on cue, I am legally adopting you as my daughter. The room erupted. Sandra burst into tears. Kayla flew into his arms. Cousins gasped and clapped. Sandra's mother shouted something at the ceiling. Camera fired off shot after shot. My dad held Kayla back at arm's length, looked out at the room, his chin trembling. I finally have the daughter I always deserved. The room broke open with applause and hugs and raised glasses. I sat at the end of the table. Nobody looked at me. Not out of cruelty, but because in the story being told in that room tonight, I didn't have a role. I wasn't even a supporting character. I was the empty chair between Derek and the wall. Beverly grabbed my arm. Hard. I said very quietly, It's all right, Beverly. It was not all right. Not one single piece of it. But the words came out of my mouth the way measurements come off a set of blueprints, stripped clean of everything that doesn't hold weight. Under the table, I pressed my thumbs into my palms until I felt the pressure. I did not call Robert. For the next hour, the room moved around my dad and Kayla like a solar system with a new sun. People lined up to congratulate them. Sandra accepted praise beside my dad like she'd negotiated a peace agreement. Cousin Ashley slipped into the empty chair beside me and leaned in close. Are you okay? I really appreciate you asking, I said. She looked like she had more she wanted to say. She didn't. Sandra's brother-in-law walked past and said to absolutely no one, Dale is just so blessed. Kayla is exactly the kind of daughter any man would want. I ate my food. Roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. I ate because it gave my hands a job to do. During dessert, Sandra pulled a chair close to mine and sat with her knees angled toward me like we were about to have a friendly chat. Jordan, I hope you understand tonight isn't about you. I looked at her calmly. I understand completely, Sandra. Good. Because we're all family here. She patted my arm and went back to my dad. Not about me. After 14 years of being repositioned in every photo, excluded from every plan, written off every holiday, and quietly erased from the company my grandfather built, she was right. It had never been about me. That was the entire problem. During dessert, I excused myself. No one noticed. I walked down the hall to Eugene's study. The door was half open, the room quiet and dark except for porch light coming through the window. The oak desk sat right where it always had. Green banker's lamp. Pine tree paperweight. A stack of my dad's invoices in the corner, the only things in that room that weren't Eugene's. I opened the top right drawer. Beneath a bundled stack of old receipts was a manila folder. Eugene's original copy of the operating agreement. 61 pages, yellowed and worn. His handwriting everywhere in the margins. Page 38. Clause 8.4. Red underline. His note in the margin. I helped clear the dishes because that's what my mother taught me. You clean up after a meal even when no one is watching, even when no one says thank you. I stacked plates, wiped down the counter, wrapped the leftover chicken in foil. Sandra never thanked me. She was in the living room helping my dad hang the framed adoption certificate on the mantel. In the exact spot where my college graduation photo used to be. I watched from the kitchen doorway. Sandra held the nail. My dad tapped it into the wall. They stepped back and admired it together like they were decorating their dream home. Kayla took a picture of it on her phone. The certificate looked like it had always lived there. I found Beverly in the hallway. I'm heading out, I said. She pulled me into a hug so tight I felt her heartbeat. What are you going to do? What I should have done 2 years ago. She didn't ask what that meant. I think she already knew. I walked to the living room. My dad was in his recliner. Kayla was perched on the armrest beside him, scrolling through photos on her phone, pointing at ones to send to family members. Happy Father's Day, Dad. He looked up. Thanks, Jay, drive safe. He pointed at something on Kayla's screen. Send that one to Uncle Victor. He didn't stand up. He didn't walk me to the door. He turned right back to the phone. I walked out. The night air was cool and smelled like fresh-cut grass and someone's neighbor grilling down the street. Crickets going full volume. I got in my car and sat for a minute, engine off. The 48-hour window was still open. I already knew I wasn't going to use it. Monday morning. 9:07 a.m. I was at my desk on the 3rd floor of the Knoxville firm where I designed structures for a living buildings engineered to carry weight without failing, to stand long after everyone who built them is gone. I picked up my phone. My hand was completely still. I noticed that. Called Robert Stein. Jordan, you're certain? The window doesn't close until 2:22 this afternoon. File it, Robert. A pause. Filing now. I hung up. Then my laptop. Pulled up the blueprints for a commercial development in Lexington I'd been working on for 3 weeks. Checked the reinforcement specs on the 2nd floor corridor. Reviewed the connection details on the parking structure. The work didn't care about my father's speech. The steel didn't care about adoption certificates or peach pie or gold-framed documents on a mantel. The numbers were honest. The numbers were clean. At 11:30, a text from Sandra, Hi Jordan. Kayla's stepping into a bigger role at the company. Your dad thinks it makes sense to reassign your office since you're rarely in the building. Can you clear out your personal items by Thursday? Thanks. My office. The small room next to my father's where Eugene used to keep the project files. The room where I used to stamp invoices on Sunday mornings as a little girl. They were handing it to Kayla. 1 week after the adoption. The same month they'd planned to reclassify my shares. The same window they'd intended to close the Nashville deal without my name anywhere on the paperwork. I didn't reply to Sandra's text. The legal notice would arrive at my father's business address in 7 to 10 business days. White envelope. Robert Stein's name in the return address. Addressed to Dale A. Cahill, Managing Member, Cahill Land and Development LLC. My dad has always opened his own mail. 9 days later, I was reviewing load calculations for a parking structure when my phone lit up. Caller ID, Dad. He hadn't called me directly in 9 months. Jordan. His voice was shaking, not from anger. From something rawer. The specific kind of shock that hits when something you always assumed was yours turns out to have had someone else's name on it the whole time. What is this? What did you do? I exercised my rights under the LLC operating agreement, Dad. What are you talking about? This letter says you've given up your shares. Says we owe you $465,000. Jordan, are you out of your mind? I exercise Clause 8.4. Voluntary relinquishment with mandatory buyback at independently appraised fair market value. It's in the agreement you signed. This is my company. Dad built this for me. Grandpa Eugene built this company. And he left 42% of it to me. You decided who this family was. I'm just agreeing with your decision. Silence. Breathing. Sandra's voice sharp in the background. What does it say? What's happening? Come to the house, my dad said. Sit down with me and Sandra, face to face. We'll work this out like a family. My attorney will be in touch, Dad. Jordan, don't do this. Think about what you're doing to this family. I have been. For 14 years. I hung up. Set my phone face down on the desk. Went back to the blueprints. $465,000. That's what 14 years of silence is worth when it's written into an operating agreement that nobody ever bothered to read. My father called an emergency family meeting for the following Saturday. Same house. Same dining room. Same table where 9 days earlier he'd stood up and told 27 people that Kayla was the daughter he always deserved. This time, 7 people. My dad, Sandra, Kayla, Aunt Beverly, Uncle Victor, my attorney, a woman named Diana Reyes who wore a charcoal blazer and carried one slim folder, and me. I arrived at 2 p.m. Diana was already there, sitting in her car. We walked in together. The dining room was clean. No banner. No balloons. No candles. The adoption certificate was still up on the mantel. My father was standing at the head of the table. Face red, jaw tight. Sandra sat to his left, gripping a coffee mug with both hands. Kayla sat across from her, eyes swollen. Tell me this is a bluff, my dad said the second I walked in. Tell me you're not actually going through with this. I'm not bluffing, Dad. Sandra leaned forward. How could you do this to your father after everything he has given you? I looked at her. I let that question sit in the air for 3 full seconds. What exactly has he given me, Sandra? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. My father slammed his palm on the table hard enough to rattle the coffee mugs. I have put 30 years into this company. I have poured myself into it. Grandpa Eugene built this company, I said, keeping my voice completely even. He put it into a trust for me. I've now voluntarily stepped away from it. Per the operating agreement you signed, you have 90 days to buy out my stake at independently appraised fair market value. That's not up for debate. That's the contract. Sandra spun toward my dad. Do something, Dale. She can't just walk in here and... Mr. Cahill. Diana opened her folder and read Clause 8.4 aloud. Every single word. The room went dead silent. Sandra shook her head. That has to be unenforceable. Something from 20 years ago. It's been part of the operating agreement since 2001, Diana said. Signed by all current members, never amended, never challenged, never superseded. Sandra shifted gears so fast I watched it happen in real time, shoulders dropping, voice falling half an octave, the whole posture softening. Jordan, honey, we are family. Surely we don't need lawyers and legal documents to get through something like this. That's not what families do. You had 14 years to handle this without lawyers, Sandra. Her composure broke. And it didn't break the way I expected. Not with rage, not with cold strategy. Something underneath it cracked open instead. I just wanted my daughter to have a real family, she said, voice unsteady. That's all I ever wanted. I just wanted us to actually be a family. I looked at her, and for one brief second I saw it. Not the woman who'd spent 14 years methodically reshaping my father's world to push me out of it. I saw someone who had been left before, badly, and who had spent every single day since making sure she would never be left again. I felt something flicker, real empathy, the kind that doesn't require an invitation. And then I looked at the mantel. The adoption certificate hanging in the exact spot where my college graduation photo used to be. The flicker went out. I saw the group chat, Dad. Every person in the room went still. Sandra's face went white. Kayla stopped breathing. Every message, I said. Calm and steady, the way I read dimensions off a blueprint. Reclassify her shares as dormant. Talk to the accountant Monday. Move forward with Nashville before Q4. Change the office door code. I looked directly at my father. I read every word. My dad looked at Sandra. Sandra would not look back at him. We were just talking through options. You said Kayla's name 9 times in your speech, I said. Mine 0. You brought 27 people together to announce she was your real daughter. You hung the adoption certificate where my graduation photo used to be. I held his eyes. You said you finally had the daughter you always deserved. He flinched. I watched those words move through him the way a crack moves through concrete, slowly at first, then everywhere at once. He opened his mouth. He couldn't get the words out. He pressed his hand over his lips. Kayla was crying. This isn't fair, you can't just... You told our cousins at Tyler's pool party that I was never really part of this family, I said. You looked me in the face and said it was true. So I'm choosing to agree with you, Kayla. I'm choosing to no longer be part of this family. And the operating agreement has a price attached to that choice. That's when Aunt Beverly stood up. She had been sitting at the far end of the table the entire time, perfectly still, hands folded, lips pressed together. She looked like a woman who had been carrying something enormous inside her chest for a very long time and had finally, quietly decided to set it down. Dale. Her voice was low and absolutely steady. I told you this was coming. 3 years ago in this kitchen, I told you that you were losing Jordan. You told me I was overreacting. My dad shook his head. Beverly, this isn't. Eugene would be ashamed of you. She said it once. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Not of Jordan. Of you. My father put his face in both hands. Beverly turned to Sandra. And you. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every photograph that got replaced. Every invitation that got conveniently forgotten. Every holiday Jordan found out about after it was already over. Every phone call that got redirected. Every plan that got made without her name on it. Beverly's voice didn't waver for a single syllable. I am Eugene Cahill's daughter. I watched my brother erase his own child from this family for 14 years, and I stayed quiet because I kept hoping he'd find his way back to her. I am done staying quiet. Kayla stared at the table. Uncle Victor, who hadn't spoken once the entire meeting, leaned forward and looked straight at my dad. Dale. Pay her what she's owed and apologize. My father lifted his face. His eyes were red. His voice was raw. $465,000, Victor. Where am I supposed to find $465,000 in 90 days? Nobody had an answer for him.